The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Monday, the 29th of September, 2025. We have a busy show for you today. In a second, we're going to bring on Mary Holland, our CEO of Children's Health Defense, to talk about Mark Blaxill and others that are now in the CDC or working for HHS. And then we're going to be, I'm going to be reading out a statement from a whistleblower in New York about the measles. You're going to want to hear this statement. And then we're going to go to talk about diabetes following vaccination, really important. A lot of diabetes won after vaccination, so we're going to be talking about that. And then Bella has got Kelly Ryerson on talking about avoiding pesticides in pregnancy. And then we have our story of the day. So let's start with Mary Holland. Welcome to the show this morning, Mary.
Good morning, Polly. How are you?
But I'm good, thank you, Mary. Now, really exciting, really, for us. Talk to us about Mark Blaxill. Many of our new people, the COVID new people, do not know who Mark Blaxill is. A lot of people have been in this movement a long time, definitely do. Tell us who he is, because look at that headline. He helped build the anti-vaccine movement, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has just hired him.
Yeah, so we don't refer to ourselves as the anti-vaccine movement. We never have. But Mark, for sure, has been involved in this movement for over 20 years, well over 20 years, probably well over 25, and has made huge contributions. About that, they're absolutely right. So Mark was on the board of Safe Minds. He's the father of a girl, a woman now close to 30 probably, or 30 on the autism spectrum. And he's a very intelligent person and who said there's something very wrong here. So he was on the board of Safe Minds. He then helped to found the really important website that's still going, Age of Autism. He was a reporter at large. He did that with Dan Olmsted, who was the managing editor. Then Dan and Mark wrote the book, Age of Autism, that I highly recommend to people. It really traces the history of the condition up to the present day. And they are the ones who found the first case that was diagnosed by Dr. Connor, which is really the word autism from the United States. He then wrote a book called Vaccines 2.0. He wrote a book called Denial, which I believe will be coming out again in early 2026. And so it's very exciting. He's now joining as a special government employee at the CDC to really look at the numbers. He also has done scientific papers with Toby Rogers, Cindy Nevison on incidence of autism and the rise and what are the only plausible explanations, and better diagnosing is definitely not a plausible diagnosis or explanation. So I'm thrilled, truly I am thrilled that Mark Blaxill is now inside the CDC and helping to really find the numbers and evaluate them.
Yeah, and Mary, he was also in Vax, the first Vax film.
Yeah.
Mark Blaxill was in Vax as well. And so not just Mark Blaxill at the CDC, we also have Lynn Redwood as well. So we're really getting our people in there.
Well, I think, these are not full-time employees. These are not people who are these are special government employees. And I'm really happy. I think Mark can really help us to make a difference. We're still up against a bureaucracy, but it's really critical to get the numbers and evaluate them.
And he's so highly intelligent. I remember years ago going to all those conferences. Before we had all this technology, we'd all used to go to conferences and sit and talk and try and figure out everything. And he was just always a super brain behind everything, very pragmatic and just,
yeah.
I mean, he's a good person to have in there.
Yeah, no, he's very, he went to Princeton and then he went to Harvard Business School. He was a Boston Consulting Group. And then he really recognized the problems with the pharmaceutical industry and separated himself from that. And so he's very intelligent. He's very pragmatic. He helped found a lot of the grassroots movement, Health Choice. I used to work with Canary Party. He actually ran for Congress in Minnesota. So he's been at this a really long time. He's been incredibly dedicated. And I'm really happy that Bobby Kennedy is sort of getting him into a position where he can really look at what happened. It's the Center for Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities within CDC, and they've really been bad guys for a long time about hiding the ball. And so I do believe Mark will really be in a position to help. We worked with him on a number of things. I've certainly personally worked with him on a number of things over the years, specifically related to vaccines and autism.
And what do you think we can expect from Mark? What exactly do you think he'll be doing now, or do we not know?
I don't think we have a full picture, Polly, but I think what we do know is that he will be trying to get access to real numbers about birth defects and developmental disabilities. We know that from Bill Thompson, the whistleblower within CDC, that they destroyed documents, that they hid the ball. And I think that now Mark Blaxill will have the opportunity to work with Bill Thompson and to follow the paper trail, the breadcrumbs that may have been left after they destroyed data. You know, we have the Simpson-Wood transcript from this meeting that was held offsite at the CDC. There's probably a lot more information, Polly, that we don't even know exists. And if anybody can help us find that, I think it's Mark.
Let's talk for a second, Mary, about the press and how they're going to portray him like they portray all of us. This whole anti-vaccine situation.
Well, they're already starting, Polly. You know, he's an anti-vaxxer. He's not a doctor. He's not a scientist. He's sort of, off. He's rogue. He's crazy. Tinfoil hat. I mean, all of that. It's just, that's so ridiculous, right? It's so absurd. This is somebody who, like so many other people in our movement, had absolutely impeccable, mainstream, prestigious credentials, who saw the light, who saw the truth, and went against the mainstream narrative, and then he is pilloried as if he is a kook or as if he is, crazy. So that's how they're going to portray it. That's the only way they can. It's completely bogus, completely bogus.
And I fail to understand, always have done, Mary, how they can call us anti-vaxxers when we vaccinated our children.
This is the lie upon lie upon lie. And Polly, one of the things we learned from the Nazis and from Hitler is it's the big lie often works better than the small lie. Big lies, people can't imagine that people would lie about that. So they didn't say in this hit piece that Brandy Zarodny did, they don't say he's the father of a woman with autism, right? They don't humanize him. Like, he's doing this to prevent other families from suffering in the way that his family has. They don't humanize us, they dehumanize us. And calling us anti-vax is an attempt at dehumanization. I think that's fading, right? Because so many people are now quote unquote anti-vax, because literally, according to the dictionary, you're anti-vax if you don't take every single government recommendation. And every single government recommendations means you've had 8 COVID shots or something like that, and every year a flu shot and all kinds of other shots. So but anyway, they're going to try to marginalize Mark, and we just have to expect that and just keep on going.
Yeah, so Mary, one other thing while I've got you is sometimes we have a few comments in the chat, just a few, and a lot on X, screaming at Bobby that he hasn't done enough. Can we just go through that for a second? Because he's been in position for 8 months, 9 months? I don't know how long he's been in position. He's actually achieved a lot.
Oh my gosh, Polly, there is a list on the HHS website what they've done, but it's extraordinary what they've done and what they've started. They haven't completed things. It's 8 months, but he's brought in people who really are dedicated to real science, telling the truth, protecting people, not just being a sock puppet for pharma. And so he's changed things, on the vaccine front alone. The COVID shots are now individual decision making. That's a big deal. You are not being forced to take these shots. It is not necessary. But he's changed things at FDA. He's changed some things at CDC, less than other places. NIH, he's changed things. Again, with vaccines, he's completely gotten rid of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, brought in new people. We're having real scientific discussions there, generally recognized as safe. They're really changing the regulations there. They're actually starting to look at the COVID death data in VAERS. That had never happened before. They're changing the direct-to-consumer advertising, which is going to make a big difference in getting people off this over-medicalization. They're focused on children's health. They're focused on fitness. The report they've made, the Maha reports, over medicalization, hyper, lack of poor quality food, on food, really calling out ultra processed food. They're going to give a definition to that. I mean, they've done a lot for 8 months, Polly. They've definitely, have they done everything we want? Absolutely not. But that would have been impossible. We have to have expectations that are in the realm of the possible. They're turning around a huge tanker, and at the beginning the changes are very slow, and then they accelerate and they go really quickly. We haven't reached that point yet, but we're going to.
Did you ever think, Mary, that you'd see a president with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. standing behind him saying the MMR should go, split it up, the hepatitis B should not be given at birth until they're at least 12 years old or whatever? Did you ever think?
Oh, Polly, that press conference a week ago, that was extraordinary. It was truly extraordinary. No, I never expected to see a president standing and saying, you can evaluate my presidency on ending the autism epidemic. I never expected to see that. And I can't begin to tell you how wonderful that was.
And so, Mary, lastly, how can our viewers, the people who love children's health defence, how can they help with this? Pray for Bobby Kennedy, please, but also tell your story is what I think. If everybody comes out and everyone's got a story, vaccinated.
The more I just talk to people, a lot of people still don't tease together what really happened to them. But the more you understand, the more you realize that literally, as Mark Black.
Well, I think we might have lost Mary there. Typical that is, isn't it? All right, well, look, Mary, that was Mary Holland. It was lovely to see Mary. I think now let's go to our next segment. So I'm going to put my glasses on, everybody. This is a statement from a whistleblower. We've spoken to the whistleblower. The whistleblower does not, for obvious reasons, at the moment, want to become known. So the whistleblower has put this letter together. It's 2 measles cases reported in New York City as Trump admin scrutinizes vaccines. So this is someone who works in the department. So let me read this out. Recently, 2 fully vaccinated young adult students in New York City contracted measles. Public health leaders had a choice: alert the public or hide the facts. They chose silence. Even as the cases moved through the CUNY dorms, labs, dining halls, and public transportation across New York and New Jersey, when the first student became symptomatic, staff brought them to the city MD. The clinic failed to notify the health department as required and sent the specimen to a private lab instead of the city's public health laboratory. That reckless decision created a nearly week-long delay in reporting and contact tracing. A secondary case emerged in the CUNY PhD student, and a group of visiting students from Florida was also exposed before returning home. To date, the public remains uninformed of how far it may have spread. Despite these alarming developments, officials have quietly kept the pertinent details under the radar. This is not about vaccine skepticism, it's about transparency. Breakthrough vaccinated cases can and do occur, and hiding them denies the public the chance to protect vulnerable and immunocompromised loved ones. We all know that if these individuals had been unvaccinated, their cases would have dominated headlines. But because they were vaccinated, the facts were buried. I know about these cases only because I work at the school. It forces a larger question. How many other vaccinated infections are quietly going unreported to protect the narrative instead of the public? Even official communications reflect this troubling omission. City colleges' notice assured students that the MMR vaccine is safe and effective and advised them to check their immunity records. But what is left out is just as important. The vaccination status of the cases and the fact that vaccinated individuals still face risk and should take extra precautions if they are immunocompromised, vulnerable, or living with loved ones who are. Officials who claim to fight misinformation are spreading it themselves. By concealing breakthrough cases, they erode trust, undermine science, and put people in danger. Silence around breakthrough vaccinated cases is just as damaging as unscientific policies. Withholding inconvenient truths does not protect public health. It fuels outbreaks. New York Mail candidate Zohran Mandani recently referenced 2 new measles cases in an X post with similar messaging about vaccination. It is unclear whether these are the same 2 CUNY cases or if these 2 are 2 additional cases. Either way, vaccination status is the critical fact that the public deserves to know. Soon after, the NYC Health Commissioner admitted in an interview that there are now 4 measles cases. She failed to disclose that 3 cases meet the threshold for an outbreak. And when asked repeatedly whether these individuals were unvaccinated, she dodged the question every single time.
2 measles cases in Manhattan triggering fears of an outbreak.
Well, joining us this morning is Acting New York City Health Commissioner Dr. Michelle Morris. So tell us a little bit about the measles here in Manhattan, and are we in danger at all of an outbreak happening?
So first and foremost, we are investigating on the Lower East Side and in Soho an exposure to measles. We've currently identified 4 cases that are related to this particular exposure.
So just to be clear, the number was 2, now it's 4?
This is part of how our investigations happen, is that as we investigate, we talk to more people, we find out who might have been exposed, and we're able to track.
And those
but
4,
that is correct.
All 4 of those individuals were unvaccinated.
So there were 3 people that were in very close contact with one first case that we identified. And so those 4 are all related. Again, 3 related to very close exposures to a first identified case. And that brings us up to 15 total cases of measles this year in New York City.
But are all those people unvaccinated?
So what's important to know actually is that they're all adults.
Okay.
And the risk, again, to New Yorkers is incredibly low. All 4 of these folks.
Right, but I'm asking about the vaccination question because at some point you need to get a booster for measles. I'm trying to figure out what exactly the guidance is.
So for adults in general, if you've had 1 vaccine dose at a certain age in the 1980s and 1990s, that was enough. Now, if you've had 2 doses or you've seen your provider and you've gotten measles titers to make sure that you're vaccinated, that you are covered, then you're all set.
Okay.
To date, neither the city nor state health departments have disclosed the vaccination status for any 2025 cases, nor in reports from prior years. Nationally, the CDC publishes aggregated data showing that 92% of 2025 measles cases are unvaccinated or unknown. It remains unclear whether states that withhold vaccination status have their vaccinated cases folded into this unvaccinated or unknown category reported by CDC. Such practices could obscure the true prevalence of breakthrough cases and complicate accurate interpretation of the data. This lack of transparency misleads the public, spreads misinformation, and creates dangerous blind spots in outbreak response. History is clear. Cover-ups don't contain outbreaks, they accelerate them. So there's that, and thank you very much to the person who brought that to our attention. But we're going to keep reporting on the measles because we're hearing of outbreaks around the country and internationally. And we all know where this is going, do we not? This is all to blame RFK Jr., even though the measles were spreading before he even took position and they jumped straight on it. We know that the measles is the one that they really want to get him on. Well, I don't see how they're ever going to do that when there's people like me that are still alive that actually had measles ourselves. And I think they're never going to get there with the measles until they've eradicated all of the real measles people who had measles and recovered. And actually, there's a lot of science to say that actually catching measles is rather good for you. It was a mild childhood illness back in the day. I don't quite know what, but as Andy Wakefield says, what about this new strain of vaccination measles? We don't know anything about that. So There's that. Okay, more to come on measles from CHD TV. And if you have anything like this person had sent to us, do contact us at stories@chd.tv and we will publish. You guys have to be the reporters. You have to report for us because we can't trust mainstream news. We all know that. So do what this person did, this whistleblower, brave whistleblower did, and let us know what is going on in your area, particularly around the measles situation. All right, everybody. Now we're going to go to our live story of the day. Good morning, Arnah. How are you?
I'm very well, Polly. Thank you for having me. I just want to thank you for how long you have fought for children's health. You're an inspiration to me. Thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. And we did actually do an interview together, didn't we, on the bus?
We did a while back, but I hope this one was much better than the last time. I was quite a ball of tears.
Well, you know what, Arnah? Every time anyone gets near that bus, even just looking at that bus now gives me goosebumps. It's very an emotional experience being at that bus. So tell us your story. I'm going to let you speak. You've got some slides as well. Talk us through what happened to your beautiful daughter, Liliana.
Yes, ma'am. So we can go to the first slide. James and I were married in 2014. Liliana came in 2017. She is here pictured with us at about 2 or 3 months old on our church stage there. That might have been Easter morning there. Anyway, we very closely followed the CDC vaccination schedule, and I did not connect the dots there with her high-pitched screaming, inconsolable crying. Colic is what I called the doctor's office many, many times about this, and they just told me, oh, it's normal for kids to cry. And yes, she was my first, but I had many, many siblings, and I knew that this was not normal. My siblings didn't cry like that. And other babies I knew didn't cry like that. So she was always crying day and night for hours. She was extremely constipated. Even though I was breastfeeding her, she would not pass through the bowel tract for days and days. And again, I called the pediatrician's office over and over again about this, and they basically shrugged it off. So let's go to the next slide. So yeah, there it is. So here's her vaccination schedule here that we followed. This is up to the 3rd dose of several of them. And then we were to travel over to Asia. We were going to be doing some important work there. And we became language students in a country that I will not name in Asia. In 2017, she was 7 months old when we traveled. And so she took some travel vaccines as well. And I also took the typhoid vaccine, which was the dosage that they wanted me to have before traveling to Asia. And yeah, so then I think we're ready for the next slide there. Okay, so here's some more vaccines that she got. I weaned Liliana at about 20 months old, just before she turned 2. She was extremely smart. She understood all her numbers, colors, shapes in 2 languages, in the Asian language in which we were located, as well as English, which we spoke at home to her. So she was extremely intelligent. And this picture that you just saw was taken just before her 2-year-old appointment, where she got MMR and the typhoid vaccine. That would have been given on February 22nd. And then again, I believe she came down with a severe ear infection right after that. And I took her to the doctor to take care of the ear infection. And then I took her back for the recommended vaccines at that time. So it was now March 23rd, 2019. She received in the right thigh the hepatitis A, and then in the left thigh, she had 1 shot that included the DTaP, the flu, the hepatitis B, and the polio. So this was unbelievable. All those antigens were put into both thighs between the 2 needles. And then let's go to the next slide there. I wish that I had read the actual package insert. I remember the doctor asking me, has your daughter ever had a vaccine reaction? And I did not understand. I didn't have any clue what he was talking about when he said vaccine reaction. I thought that reaction meant whether a child cries or not. So I said, oh, yes, she cries a lot after every vaccine. And he just kind of laughed and said, oh, that's normal. No, that's not what I meant by vaccination, by reaction. And so I consented to have her vaccinated that day. And so let's go on and show that screen, Lou, again, the one you just took off, the 2A, I believe it was. Okay, so this one, if you zoom in on the yellow, it says that it includes human diploid lung tissues. Those are taken from aborted fetal tissue, unborn child. And that is an abomination to me. And it should be an abomination to everyone who hears this. So now I'm looking at that and I cannot believe that that went into my child. But it also has in yellow, look down there, it says fetal bovine serum. What's that doing in a vaccine? That's cow cells, cow blood or some part of the cow, an unborn cow. That's hideous. Anyway, that was in the needle. So, okay, the next one, I think you can go to the next slide there. So this is the result of, I connect it to the vaccines. This happened about a month and a week after the vaccines that I just named. But we had seen Liliana lose weight dramatically. I'm talking about 6 pounds within 2 weeks. She was constantly thirsty, muscle weakness. She could barely even stand up and walk. And she had been walking for over a year. She was short of breath, just, that kind of, there was extreme lethargy, light sensitivity. I would take her out of the dark room and then she would just scream because the light was in her eyes. And that was not normal. She was vomiting, bedwetting every single night, every single nap time. I was changing sheets constantly. And that was also not normal because I had bought some really good diapers. And so to wet through the diaper was just unheard of. So I knew something was wrong before that picture that you just saw when she was actually in the emergency room and in the hospital. Twice I had taken her into the pediatrician and said, something's wrong. She's not acting normal. I'm really concerned. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was dreadfully wrong. And he didn't run blood tests at all. He didn't check blood sugar. He didn't, he concluded because I guess because I said she was vomiting, he concluded it was the flu. So he sent me home with an antibiotic, which now I know that's not the right thing anyway for the flu. But he sent me home with that and a suppository to get her bowels moving because she also hadn't passed any bowels in over a week, which was very painful for her. And so, I took her in twice. And then one day I came home from shopping and I saw her sitting on the chair. She was with a babysitter. And I said, Liliana, what's going on? She looked like she didn't even recognize me. She was looking through me, almost like I wasn't even there. And I was scared. I thought something's definitely wrong with her. I don't know what it is, but I took a picture of her, a video, and I quickly texted a friend of ours who was a nurse who lived maybe 2 minutes away at that time, and he also spoke English. So as soon as he got my text, he watched the video, drove over to our house so fast, and he took a urine specimen, which I wish the doctor would have done this in the hospital, but this nurse was so smart. He took a urine specimen right there from her wet diaper, and he found sugar in her urine. And so I didn't know what type 1 diabetes was. I had never heard of it back then. But he looked at me and he said, she's got sugar in her diaper. She's got diabetes. And I was in shock. I didn't know what was happening. The next scene was like a blur for me. This nurse said, we've got to get her to the emergency room immediately. He could see the trauma that she was in, and he could tell that she was dying. She was basically dying in front of our eyes. So he put us in the car, my husband and me, and he drove us to the hospital and talked to the emergency room doctors and got her started on insulin. She was diagnosed the next day in the intensive care unit, which is the picture you see on the screen now. She's in the intensive care unit there. So we stayed in that hospital for a total of 10 days. Polly, it was the most horrific nightmare I have ever experienced in my entire life. Constantly, I mean, she was already dehydrated. I told you she was losing all that fluid, losing all her electrolytes, losing all her, food through the vomiting, and they wouldn't let her eat because they needed to have a fasting blood sugar. So this poor starving child is being denied food for another 12 hours. 12 hours for a 2-year-old, which made it about 24 hours of not having food. Well, she was begging me for milk, begging me for something. And they kept sticking her, trying to get blood samples. And you try to get a blood sample from a child who is dehydrated, you can't get a vein. So what are they doing? They're asking me to hold her down. I was passing out. I was literally passing out from the trauma of watching her scream. They're digging around with the needle in the vein, trying to get the vein so they can draw blood. Over and over and over again, finger pricking, trying to figure out what her blood sugar is. Well, guess what it was? The blood sugar, let me see in my notes what it was, because I don't want to misquote here. At her diagnosis, her blood sugar was 657 milligrams per deciliter. 657.
And what should it be?
It should be lower than 100. Ideally about 83. Okay, so 600, that is, you can't live like that. So the nurse later, he didn't want to scare me that day, but our friend, that nurse that came to our house, he told me if we hadn't got her insulin that day, she would have died. She had obviously been diabetic for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. For that whole time, I had been seeing her have those symptoms. And she had needed insulin the whole time, and it would just kept getting worse and worse and worse, you see? So, yeah, this turned her entire personality on its head. She had been a happy, outgoing, very loving and trusting child. And then all of a sudden, she has her mother holding her down and her father, in like 4-point restraint so that the doctors can stick her over and over again with insulin and with needle pricks and all these things. And so she's looking at us like we're enemies now. She was trying to hit me and she thought I was against her now. I was just, the trauma of seeing your child think that you are trying to hurt them is heartbreaking. And seeing her in that pain, and then every time she'd see someone with a white coat come in, she would know they're going to stick me, and she'd start screaming again, just looking at them. So it completely changed her personality. She's still extremely shy. She's never completely gotten over that trauma.
I'm not surprised. And what about her life today? Because she's 8.5 today. How does it affect her?
So yes, this story, thank you for asking me how her life is today, because that's what I want to transition into. I've lost track of my notes, Lou. I don't even know where I am right now in my notes. Just see if you can find the picture that has to do with her. Let's see. Yeah, go to number 8, the first of number 8, I believe, where we traveled back. That's right, back to the United States. So this is going back to the United States, and on the way there, I felt so hopeless and drained, no sleep and all that. But once we got to the United States, Polly, and you're asking how she's doing now, I knew this has got to change. We cannot keep seeing the blood sugars go up and down and up and down. I was searching frantically for anything to help her blood sugars. And I found food. okay, well, I started watching videos, reading books, educating myself, and I started learning more and more about what's known commonly as the ketogenic diet. Some people just call it a very low carbohydrate diet. It doesn't matter what you call it. The principle is, if a person can't break down sugar, then why would I give them sugar? So this is the beautiful thing now. Today, she has normal blood glucose levels. And yeah, there she is. She was about 2 right there. We were just starting on the keto diet there. And look at that smile. I mean, like, it's just such a change. And the doctor was against it. The doctors don't believe that keto is good for kids. But
Because they can't make any money out of it, that's why.
Exactly. And you don't use as much insulin. There's not as much money for pharma coming in. You don't have a lot of the side effects that high blood sugars cause. You know, you don't, and that's my whole reason, my husband and I, that's our whole reason for wanting to feed her in this way, is so that she can more long-term have better health outcome. There she is now.
She's beautiful.
Healthy 8-year-old child. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now she's 8.5. That's Liliana. Yeah. And yeah, she is very smart now. She's actually doing 7th grade math, 4th grade and everything else. Like, we homeschool her.
So does she have to wear that thing on her arm that so many people wear? No.
Unfortunately, yes. And the reason for that, Polly, I do know of the, yeah, don't show that video. That's such a terrible video of all of my, my crying and everything. But yeah, there it is. So yes, she wears that. It's to communicate with the pump via Bluetooth. And it does that so that we know what her blood sugar is by day and night. Otherwise, there is extreme danger. If she was to go low in the night, she could actually pass away and she could die. So I know it has that, you know, that kind of electromagnetic frequency, and we are aware of that, but I also want to be safe at the same time with her life and not jeopardize her.
Well, you know, we see so many, I just walking around the airport, or I was in England, went to a family event, and there were like 4 kids with those things on their arms. They're just, you see them everywhere now.
Yeah, I don't think everyone should be wearing them. I think the type 1 people, people with type 1 diabetes is much more serious. Hers is autoimmune. It's irreversible, at least for now. There's not a cure to silence the antibodies against what's happening to her beta cells in the pancreas, okay? So for her, it's not reversible. But for type 2s, they don't necessarily have to wear that. And there are many more people who have type 2 diabetes that are wearing those on their arms, and I don't see the need for that necessarily.
I just ask you a question before we finish here. So you clearly were pro-vax, we certainly weren't anti-vax, so that Liliana got a lot of vaccines. It just took 1 for my child to be injured, but she had a lot. How do you feel now about vaccinations?
Very negative. Yeah, I'm against them. Yes, honestly, I am completely against them, because I see what happened to Liliana, I believe, was called molecular mimicry. And people don't talk about that a lot with vaccines. It's not, autism can and does happen after vaccination and due to vaccination in many cases. But things like autoimmune disease, which is what Liliana has, type 1 is an autoimmune disease, and that happens after a vaccination because you're actually triggering the child's own immune system to fire against whatever's in that bottle in the vaccine itself. But you are also taking a risk with what else is in that bottle. You know, there are parts of the vaccine components that are very closely identified to our own body tissues, our own physical makeup as a human. So, you know, the pancreas is what regulates the insulin there, right? So if the molecular mimicry from the vaccine is actually triggering cells, your own, I forget what it's called, the response that you're supposed to get from a vaccine, right? it comes and attacks your beta cells in your pancreas instead, then it's all over. You have type 1 just like that. So yes, I'm completely against the vaccines.
You have a website, eatforhealth.us, and you're willing to help people, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. So I went to school. I'm completely certified now as a metabolic health practitioner and a coach practitioner as well. So I do take patients, I take clients. If people want to go to my website, that's perfectly fine and wonderful. They can check it out, and I can do a 20-minute free consultation with them at absolutely no charge for that.
And so I'm pleased that Liliana is doing well. So it's an amazing story what you've done. It's always the parents that have to turn this around. You get no help from the white coat people. You need to know that. They're not going to help you. You have to figure it out yourself. All this,
yes, ma'am. Yeah.
With the trust that we had in the doctors and the medical establishment, to the disasters of what happened to our children, to then financially it cripples you, by the way, and you have to figure it out and do what you can to save your child the best way you can. You're never really going to get them back to where they were before because it's too late, the needle's gone in. But people, please listen to people like Arnah and all those families out there trying to warn you about the dangers of vaccination. It is real, it is true, it is serious, life-altering, it is horrific, it is heartbreaking, it is everything that you don't want to happen in your family. But yes, you've just shown us how you can turn a really awful situation into one that's bearable. And Liliana, I mean, wow, she must be a strong little girl. Look at her.
Praise to God. Yes, yes. I'm glad you went to that picture, Lou. Thank you. So this is Liliana now, and this is what true health looks like. Being around the table with your family, people that you love the most. This is my husband, James, next to me, and my mom, Liliana's grandmother, right across from me at the table there. Yeah. And she's probably watching this podcast right now. So
she is. What's her name?
Patrice Williams. Yes, my mom.
Williams. Well, I bet Patrice is really proud of you, her daughter, and everything that you've done to turn this around. I know I would be. You're an amazing person. And thank you so much for sounding the alarm, sharing your stories. What everybody should be doing right now. Please come to Stories at CHD TV so that we can put your story out there. HHS needs your stories. The world needs your stories. Arnah, thank you so much. It was lovely to see you again.
Yes, you too, Polly. Thank you for this opportunity. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Well, now we're going to go to Isabella, and she's going to be talking to Kelly Ryerson, glyphosate girl, about the dangers of glyphosate in pregnancy.
Good morning, CHD. My name is Bella Yon. Welcome to our Mothers to Be segment where we chat all things preconception, pregnancy, postpartum, birth, and that precious, precious first year of life. I'm really excited to be introducing our guest today, Kelly Ryerson. She is such an expert on glyphosate, and today we're going to be chatting about how glyphosate impacts preconception and fertility, and also during pregnancy. Can it even affect baby during pregnancy? So welcome, Kelly. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, I know lots of our viewers are probably familiar with you and your amazing work, but for those who are new to meeting you, do you mind just quickly telling us a little bit about yourself and what got you into this work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been doing this work now for probably 10 years or so. So it's been quite some time. And I got into it originally because right after I'd had my second child, I started getting a lot of really uncomfortable physical symptoms, things like rashes, and I was losing hair and really exhausted. My eyesight wasn't good. Just my body was really inflamed and really falling apart. And so I went to see several different specialists, like throughout the whole Stanford hospital system, to try and figure out what was wrong with me. And no one really had an answer except to give me a lot of different drugs to try, including, of course, because I'm a woman, and they're like, oh, you're a new mom, so you must be stressed out. So I was given 2 antidepressants, benzodiazepine, then steroids and gabapentin, and just was layered on with these medications. And it was such a nightmare, and nothing was helping. And And so I eventually thought, well, maybe I am crazy, because they told me every single time it was psychological. And I went to see a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist had intake blood work, and he wasn't a functional psychiatrist, a mainstream psychiatrist, happened to have this blood work that had vitamins in it. And it was the first time that anyone had tested me for vitamins to see what those levels were. I mean, really, I'd gone to like endocrinologists, all these people, no one tested. It came back that I had scurvy. Which is like, I had third world conditions because I was so malnourished. So no C, a very low B12, 0 D, just a B1 of nothing. Like, I just was like a third world person. And I brought this back to my general practitioner, and she said, oh, those vitamins don't really mean anything. That wouldn't be the root cause of, all your ailments. And I was like, I'm okay. At this point, I'm cutting ties, because that just logically, it makes absolutely no sense. So I left that practice. I got a new doctor. The doctor said, try giving up gluten. I was like, I can't imagine that's going to help that much, because I'm very, very sick. At this point, I had to move in with my parents. They're taking care of my kids. And so I suddenly started getting better, and I was putting vitamins back in my body, and I was eating cleanly and started eating even organically, and went to a conference on gluten at the Columbia Celiac Center. I don't have celiac. I have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And a scientist was standing and saying, we don't know what's behind this big epidemic of gluten sensitivity, but it is skyrocketing. And so I stopped and I asked, okay, well, what are they? I went to the microphone, actually. I said, is anything being sprayed on the farm that might be impacting us? And no one there knew, but someone from General Mills, who was there to sell his gluten-free Cheerios, found me and told me about how Roundup, the pesticide, the herbicide, weed killer, is sprayed on the grain right before harvest. And so it's called pre-harvest desiccation, meaning it's going like, this farmer spray it, it goes right to the mill, it ends up right in our food. And I was like, that does not sound good. So I started my deep dive there. I live outside of San Francisco. There are huge cancer trials that have been going on connecting glyphosate to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I went into the courthouse because actually I was going to protest Monsanto, who is the manufacturer of glyphosate, because I was like, this is terrible. And I thought San Francisco would have a big scene of activism, and they didn't. And I walked right into that courtroom, and that's where RFK Jr. was testifying, or was one of the attorneys. Sat right down with the attorneys and ended up naming myself Glyphosate Girl, and started a blog to cover everything that was actually happening in the courtroom, because mainstream media wasn't spilling it. So I've done that. I've gone and testified at the EPA, the USDA, the FDA on food safety and these chemicals in our food, and continue working on all things pesticides.
Amazing. Kelly, thanks so much. It's so funny. I feel like a lot of us have a similar story, where we endured something, or we were so frustrated we weren't getting answers for a medical condition or something going on. And, my story is very similar to yours in that regard. So I totally relate. So for new people to this, some people may be like, what even is glyphosate? Do you mind giving us a little glyphosate 101? What exactly is it, and why should we be so worried about it?
Yes. So glyphosate is, as I was mentioning, the active ingredient in the weed killer Roundup. And it is the most used herbicide or pesticide of all time. And it is really in everything. It was originally in the 1960s just used actually as a metal pipe cleaner because of its incredible ability to bind to minerals. And so if you think about a pipe, binds to minerals, it collects what is there, and you can flush it out of your metal pipe. So metal pipe cleaner. In the early 70s, Monsanto discovered it also had herbicidal properties. So herbicide being weed killing and plant killing. And so they decided to put it together with a surfactant, which is like a soapy-like substance that can help to spread the glyphosate, and put it in this product called Roundup. And Roundup was launched in the mid 70s, and a lot of people were really happy about it because it was considerably less toxic than some other pesticides that had been on the market. So people started using it in landscapes and gardens, and then farmers started using it as well. And they thought it was a miracle because it was being marketed as being totally non-toxic. It doesn't impact humans. And so you saw this use. And then in the mid 90s, there was a true explosion in the use of glyphosate because of the introduction of Roundup Ready GMOs. So when you think about GMOs, and probably a lot of people know this, but it was surprising to me. I didn't know it actually until I sat in the trials. GMOs, genetically modified organisms, these seeds were developed specifically to be able to withstand the effects of Roundup. So when you see on the side of packages, or whatever, non-GMO, it means that this type of seed was not used. So it was originally developed, though, because this was a perfect business plan where the patent was going to be running out for Monsanto, on the manufacturer, on Roundup. So if they could create these seeds, like corn seeds, soy seeds, cotton seeds, that would be resistant to the effects of Roundup, now the farmer can go and plant these seeds, and they can take Roundup and spray it all over the crop, even while it's growing, and only the weeds around the crop will die. So then around that time, you see this massive explosion in the production of soy and corn that are GMO Roundup ready, and it has now taken over our whole ag system. And when you look at the maps of glyphosate use, you see this explosion starting around 1996. And so it's just this very, very dense use, particularly in our heartland. So that was the beginning. So between the GMO seeds and then what I was talking about earlier with this pre-harvest spray, it's called pre-harvest desiccation. And the reason why farmers do that is because it actually can be really hard during harvest time to time your harvest exactly right. You can have one part of the field that is fully ripe and ready to be harvested. You can have another part that's still wet. So it's hard because they don't want to go out all the time and do multiple passes. That's labor intensive and expensive. And so it was discovered actually over in Europe that you could do this practice probably in the late 90s, and then made its way over to the United States, where the farmer can go and just spray on top of the crop. So wheat, oats, sugarcane, actually legumes too, so chickpeas, can go out and spray all of these. They all dry up, and so they can just do a clean harvest, send to the mill, and done. Unfortunately, those residues stay, as I was mentioning. So now we have glyphosate in everything. We have it in the rain, we have it in the water, we have it in cotton, we have it in our hair, it's in our urine, it's in men's semen. There aren't people walking around that don't have it in their system unless they live someplace far away from not just agricultural use, but even landscaping use. It's truly present everywhere. And the EPA has done a horrible job in actively and actually revealing what the health ramifications are of this type of exposure.
Yeah, that's crazy and so scary. And so speaking about like the ramifications of glyphosate, specifically when it comes to fertility, what do we know about glyphosate's impact on fertility, egg quality, sperm health, conception rates, all of that? Do we know anything about that?
We do know a lot about that. And just to back up too, the EPA is supposed to be doing these endocrine disrupting screens. And so taking a chemical, especially something as widely used as glyphosate, and be putting it through rigorous assessment as to whether or not it can disrupt our fertility, basically, and our hormones. And what they did is, and I actually testified to the EPA on this just last September, and now a year ago. So what they did is they said that there's no need to do an endocrine disrupting screen because they've already taken a look at the research and it shows that it's not an endocrine disruptor. Now, I asked for this research because it's all paid for by industry, so by Bayer Monsanto, and they said that they can't give it to me because it's proprietary corporate information. Only 4 of the, I think it's 32 studies were actually from an independent source, but of course they all show that there's no endocrine disruption. Now, if you go into PubMed, which is a place that anyone can go, by the way, I really highly recommend it. It's a library of published research that is independent most of the time, but sometimes you have to look and see who paid for it. But you can go and do your own research. So if you go and you put in glyphosate and say fertility, or glyphosate endocrine disruption, glyphosate ovarian function, you can go and find a lot of research. So anyway, I brought this research to the EPA. I've oftentimes focused on female fertility and frankly got nowhere. And so I decided to change it and start focusing on male fertility because it very much impacts that as well. And there was a little more eye-opening, but not enough that anything will be done. So when you think about what this chemical is doing to our different systems, it's highly connected with decreases in testosterone and decreases in estrogen, and in some cases increases in estrogen, depending on what the study is. But it is definitely manipulating what our hormone levels are saying. I actually, back before the research was out yet on semen, I took 4 samples of semen from 4 different guys, sent it to the lab, and all 4 came back positive for glyphosate. Now, research does exist that shows that glyphosate can kill or slow down the motility of sperm. So we know now, and when we look and we see this huge crash in sperm counts in this country, I think it's down 50% in the last few decades. And you think this is the most used pesticide of all time. Well, it's not hard to make that mental leap that this probably has something to do with it. So in terms of thinking about the male fertility, that's really a big one.
Yeah. Wow. So shocking. And you wonder why there's such a infertility epidemic, right? More than ever before, people are struggling to conceive. Crazy. So let's now focus to pregnancy. My burning question for you, and a lot of people have asked me this too, can glyphosate cross the placenta? Can it get to baby if we are consuming it, or is baby protected? Do we know?
Well, I'll tell you what. So there are studies that show that it definitely crosses the placenta. And we think about the placenta as being this protective tissue that will protect our babies from anything like this. Unfortunately, it makes its way through the placenta down the umbilical cord and right into our babies. In fact, I took my daughter's baby tooth that she lost and I sent it in to a lab and it came back positive for glyphosate. I'm positive for glyphosate in that tooth that formed in utero. And I just, oh my gosh, it just made me furious. And so, no, it definitely is down there and impacting the development of our babies.
So scary. And what about things like miscarriage, birth defects, complications? Are there any studies linking glyphosate to those issues during pregnancy?
Yes. So during pregnancy, and this is why it's so important to avoid, it has been connected to shorter gestational periods, so early birth. It's been connected to miscarriages because sometimes the glyphosate can cause a detachment of the embryo from the side of the uterus. It's been connected with something very disturbing in terms of the sexual change. So there was a study done by Dr. Shauna Swan from Mount Sinai. She looked at the levels of glyphosate in second trimester pregnant women. And then she went and she measured the distance between the anus and the vagina of the baby girl fetuses. This is what she does studying endocrine disruption. She found that the higher the amount of glyphosate in that urine of the pregnant woman in second trimester, the longer the distance between the vagina and the anus, meaning it was a masculinization of our baby girl fetuses, pending on how much glyphosate the mom was exposed to. That is really significant. It also has been shown, and this is a really crazy study. In fact, we're kind of waiting to see around now is when some of the Roundup babies are going to be born, because there are a lot of rat studies that show, mouse and rat studies that show that the impact isn't immediate. Like, so my children, for example, I know I had glyphosate during pregnancy. I didn't know better. My children may not have had a direct impact, let's say. It's not until their children and the children after that that you really see the ramifications of that first exposure of the original mom, so me. And that is transferred usually through the sperm or the epigenetic changes in the sperm. So the epigenetic changes are things that, it's just triggering different genetic combinations that now are going to be creating mayhem down the line. So that was really a big discovery to understand the multi-generational impact of what you're doing right now. And so it's not just your kids, it's like, several generations out.
Wow, that's crazy. Right, let's get practical and help these mamas. What can mums be doing, whether they are preparing for conception or if they are pregnant, to try and avoid glyphosate? How can we try and avoid it as best as we can? I know you said it's everywhere. Maybe we can't fully escape it, but are there things that we can do to help?
Yes, absolutely. There are things. And otherwise, we just shouldn't bother talking about it because we're doomed. So it's good news that there is definitely some good steps. So first of all, of course, let's start with diet. This is true when you're pregnant, but before you're pregnant as well. In fact, there is one of my good friends is a pediatrician, and she says that 6 months leading up to conception are really important for cleaning out your system, particularly of glyphosate, but really of all kinds of toxins. So that means looking very closely and deciding to invest in what you're eating. And what you'll find is if you buy organic food, so certified organic, now there's a lot of like, oh, that's not worth it, that's probably fraudulent and whatever. But truthfully, it's the best thing we have in terms of organic food. I mean, there might be still levels of glyphosate on it, but by and large, you're going to have a lot less glyphosate on organic food than you will if you buy non-organic food. So that is step number one. If you cannot buy organic food for whatever reason, or you don't have access to that, or you live in a food desert kind of situation, then it's important to know what foods you should avoid. And for this, I really like the Environmental Working Group's Dirty Dozen. They put out a list every year talking about high levels. It's the Clean 15 and then Dirty Dozen. So things like strawberries, actually potatoes are now on this list. A lot of the berries are, and a lot of the greens, so spinach and a lot of lettuces, those will have really high levels of pesticide residues if they're not organic. So in that case, it would be good to not buy those particular foods, but it's a great resource that I really recommend. So then expanding out, how else environmentally can you limit? Certainly look around, and if you have a landscaper, or, maybe your husband's out there, make sure that glyphosate and Roundup are not being used, because that dermal exposure that you're going to have is not good. And by that, I mean, if you were walking barefoot, if you're touching things, it can go up. And this is actually how the cancer oftentimes starts. It goes in through your skin and into your bloodstream and can wreak havoc. So you don't want to be walking barefoot in any area that's been sprayed with anything that could come up into your circulatory system. So thinking about that. And then another thing that's just really easy, take off your shoes when you go into your house. Don't walk around, just have that exposure left at the door. There have been studies that have shown just how much less exposure you have when you take your shoes off. Another thing that I think people usually a lot of times don't think about, and I didn't even think about, even though I'm studying this stuff all the time. If you buy cut flowers at the supermarket, whatever, because you're so excited about your tulips, you buy your tulips, you bring them in. Those typically have enormous levels of pesticide residues. It is going to be even more than food because it's not edible, so they can spray a lot more. So when you're touching things like flowers, be sure you're wearing rubber gloves. And because that, once again, chemicals can go up into your bloodstream. And actually there has been some really sad stories of florists that are constantly touching these flowers, and eventually it builds up and accumulates and causes disease. So those are just some simple things. Another big one is getting a water filter. So I actually made this big investment for a water filter. It was a whole house water filter, and it didn't work. Like it made our water pressure so dismal that we couldn't have the dishwasher and take a shower at the same time. And so we cut that off. But what I do have is underneath my sink, I have in my kitchen, I have an isolated little faucet that specifically is for just my drinking water. And I use it for pasta. I use it for everything. And I feel really good about at least having that source be super clean.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's also just rewinding to the flowers. That's crazy. You're right. You would never think about that. And it makes me think I remember learning that Christmas trees are the same.
Yes.
Right. People bring these ginormous trees into their house and they're covered in pesticides. Again, it's just things you don't think about, but it really is.
No, yeah, because you look at, you're like, those are so pretty. There's no way, right? You're not thinking that is a toxic load.
Crazy. The amount of flowers you learn something every day. Thank you. Kelly, this has been so amazing and so insightful. We always like to end our segment with this one question, and that is, if you have one piece of advice to a woman preparing for pregnancy? So in this instance, it's preconception or a woman who is pregnant. What would it be?
Well, aside from what I've said, so just eating organically, that is probably the number one thing I would say. And I wish, once again, I wish I could go back in time and do that myself. Yes. Actually, just because my mental health changed so much with this, I'm going to give a recommendation for magnesium. Okay. Because most of us are walking around deficient in magnesium. And this is a big reason why. Remember when I was talking about how glyphosate binds to minerals? It was used as a metal pipe cleaner. It does the same thing in soil. So it's binding to magnesium and zinc and all these minerals that we need, making them unavailable to the food that we're eating. So we're all walking around deficient. So when you think about road rage and like all kinds of just, Twitter or like whatever it is in the fighting, I know that a part of that is magnesium deficiency because that's what keeps us chill. Yeah. So, I really like myself. I take magnesium citrate. I really like it. I wish I'd had it during pregnancy, but, check with your OB and be sure that that's okay for you.
I love it. I love it. Kelly, thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom here today. And if you guys are watching and have any other questions for Kelly or myself, please reach out. We'd be happy to help you on your pregnancy and preconception journey. We will see you guys next week. Thank you so much.
I'm Jackie Chin, and I have a vaccine-injured son.
Tell us about how your son was before the injury, the vaccines, and the consequences of the vaccines.
Oh my goodness. Well, when my son was born, he was a surprise baby. So I had two older children, ages 13 and 8. And so I was a seasoned mother by the time I had Michael. And when he was born, and then matured into a little walking 1-year-old. We had a lot of fun playing rollerball, and the older kids just adored him because he was just so vibrant and, just so playful, and he was just like a little doll, and it was all a great thing until he was vaccinated on his 15-month vaccinations, which included the MMR. And he was born on April Fool's Day, 1999, and on July 5th, 2000, he received not only his MMR, but I believe several other vaccines on the same day. I forget actually which ones they were. I want to say one was the Varivax, but I'm not positive.
Do you mean the chickenpox or varicella?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, varicella. What did I say? Varivax? Varicella. And so that day I brought him home after he had gotten his vaccinations, and he was very sleepy, and I put him in his crib. And he just slept and slept. And when my husband came home from work, he's like, Michael can't be sleeping, still sleeping. And we went back up and tried to wake him, and he was very limp. And we picked him up, and he started crying, and it was very scary. And he had struck a high temperature, a very high temperature that night, and started screaming. And I'd called the doctor, and the doctor said that I'm sure this is fine. This is a normal sort of reaction, and that the fever should go away within a couple weeks. And if he's no better in a couple weeks, then give us a call. And that was that.
So it is very similar to Billy's story.
Mm-hmm.
So how old is he now?
He's 17 years old.
And how is he now?
Well, he still has autism. I mean, Is he verbal? He is verbal. When I saw Billy on the screen, this is the second time I've seen Billy on the screen because this is my second viewing of Vaxxed. My son does remind me, or Billy reminds me of my own son. Yes, he is. After many years of detoxification and different treatments that we've tried, my son is fully verbal. He can read books like Harry Potter. He has meaningful conversations. He completely, his social cues are totally off. Oftentimes he'll lose his temper over little things. He still has sensory issues, etc. You know, I mean, it's an ongoing thing, and you're doing it alone because the doctors don't help you. In fact, I don't even have a doctor. I don't even have a doctor. So, you know, where are you going to go? Where are you going to go to treat autism? That's what I'd like to know.
Thank you for telling the story.
Oh, thank you, Polly. I appreciate it.
Have you written his name on the bus?
I did. You did.
I did it.
History doesn't wait. This is our moment to rise, unite, and reclaim our children's health.
Join us here in Austin, Texas this November at the Children's Health Defense Conference.
In the wake of unprecedented medical overreach and censorship, the world is waking up, and people like you are leading the way.
We're at a turning point in history. With the pandemic behind us, our fight for freedom and health has reached the global stage.
This is our moment of truth, and we're ready to seize it together.
And Children's Health Defense has been at the forefront of this charge. Our 2025 conference brings together the leaders, visionaries, and warriors who made it happen.
Meet the parents whose lives were forever changed, and hear from doctors who risked everything to speak out. Stand with those who refused to be silenced.
You are going to hear from world-renowned speakers, doctors, and frontline leaders driving the medical freedom movement.
Discover real-world solutions grounded in science, integrity, and human rights.
Join the discussion to talk about vaccines, informed consent, parental rights, and so much more.
And you'll, of course, hear from your favorite CHD personalities, sharing the latest on CHD's research, litigation, and outreach.
And while you're there, soak up the energy, culture, and music of beautiful Austin, Texas.
Whether you're a parent, a practitioner, or a medical freedom advocate, this is your call to action to protect what matters most.
Be part of the movement that is rewriting the story for generations to come.
So please join us.
Join us.
Join us. Let's make history together in Austin.